Three, two, one, and we are live with Christa Nichols. How are you, Christa?
Good. I'm good. How are you?
Good, 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 good. And so maybe we start with a little bit of your background. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I am a copywriter. I write high ticket copy for 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs. I also have a training program that teaches a messaging framework to entrepreneurs so that they can learn how to answer questions and break down objections to sale. I live on a farm in Iowa with my husband and 2 kids, and I love going to digital marketing conferences and music, reading, all that good stuff. So,
For
me in a
sure.
nutshell.
That's awesome. Did you say music reading?
Music
What?
and reading, and yeah,
Oh, I
just
gotcha. And that, how did you get started with copy? How did you get started with that?
well, I have a degree in journalism. So back in the day when I was in college, I studied as a writer, and then I built a graphic design business. But a couple years ago, I decided to get back into writing again and started studying digital marketing and Facebook ads and conversions and sales copy, and started picking up some projects and getting back into writing again, and realized that it was something I'd really missed, and became a pretty good business venture for me. I've had a really good time.
That's awesome. And what was the first obstacles that you had when you decided to start writing copy?
Well, I started out, what happened was I was running a business, and pretty much one company held 80% of my contracts. And out of the blue, one day about 3 years ago, I got a phone call from the office manager, and she told me that she was packing up her stuff. That day was her last day, because the company owners had announced their retirements and they had not told anyone. And so that meant, 80% of my business was suddenly kind of up in the air. Long story short, they never did retire, but it really gave me the push that I needed to realize that I didn't want to be stuck depending on one company for 80% of my income, that I wanted something to change. I wanted to build something that was stronger, something that I enjoyed more, something that was more flexible for me instead of being like a glorified employee. I wanted to build something where I was in charge. And so I joined a couple of masterminds and mentorship groups for digital marketing, and kind of had to work my way up from the bottom. I wasn't known in the industry at all. I didn't have a network. And then in the first 6 months, I burned out. When you first start something, you take any project you can. I ended up signing on for projects for things that I didn't enjoy doing, wasn't necessarily that good at. And so about 6 months in, I realized that I couldn't imagine myself doing this for the next couple of decades or whatever. So I I fired all my clients, or I didn't renew contracts. And that's when I took a position as a copywriter in a Facebook ads agency. And it wasn't a conscious decision that, okay, yeah, I'm going to write copy now. It was more like, this is something that I know I enjoy and I can do while I figure everything else out. And so that was the beginning of writing copy. That was about 2 years ago. And I just started picking up projects on my own, stepped out of the agency model, and went out on my own doing copy about 8 months ago. And we're on target for $250,000 this year in revenue. So
Awesome.
calculated risk. It was good. It was scary, but it was good.
That's awesome. How was the maybe the night or the couple days or the week where they said, "Hey, they're retiring"? Like, how was that for you? Like, home personally, as a woman, as an employee, as a business person, all that, in all
Yes.
dimensions.
Well, at that time, my business was the primary income for our family. My husband had had a career outside of the home. He had a shoulder injury that made it impossible for him to continue with that career. And so I had brought him inside my business So we were both working in this one business. And so that was really, really hard. Like, it was terrifying for me. I was terrified because we had put everything in this one thing, this one basket. We didn't have another stream of income coming in. And so it was sink or swim. It was do or die, make something happen, or I knew I was going to have to go out and get a job in corporate, and I would have had to start at the bottom. I would have been driving 3 hours a day probably in order to get to a place that would have a position that would be a good fit for me. And we had just started homeschooling our kids. So it was intense. The first 6 months or so were really hard. There was a lot of breaking down for my mindset that had to occur because I had been an employee really my whole life. I never planned on being an entrepreneur. I didn't have any business training whatsoever. I just had technical skills,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was hard. It was definitely put your feet to the fire, and you either grow or you don't. So it was a lot of stress, a lot of uncertainty and up in the air, but I just kept going because I knew that I had to try.
Yeah. Wow. And it's so crazy because we were traveling for like a couple of years. It makes me think of a time, and we thought we were gonna do online school so we could travel with her. She was like 13, our daughter, and we didn't realize how much work that was to do. And even it was like an online school. It wasn't home school. But
Mhm.
even then, like we had to be on top of it and be sure. So I can't imagine like that big transition for you of homeschool and then trying to start a business.
What sleep? Sleep? What sleep? Yeah.
And
You
so how
learn
was
how much you're capable of when something like that
right?
happens.
Yeah, that's so crazy. It's like they call Parkinson's law. That if it takes, if you have an hour to do something, you'll get it done in an hour. If you have 24 hours,
Yeah.
you'll take 24 hours.
Right? It's so true.
Yeah, and so we can push ourselves so much. And so, what was the first steps when you talk about masterminds?
Mhm.
Um, what did you always kind of had that mentality? Like, I need to go to a group to like get something in here, or was that like something that came out of necessity, or how did you make that transition? Or
It was definitely necessity, because once I left the traditional educational, I got my college degree and all that, I didn't really have a professional network. My business was all run from home, and so I had nothing to fall back on really. But I thought to myself, okay, so I have this graphic design business with 80% less workload. I'll just learn how to promote it myself. And so I joined a learning group for social media marketing. And that's how that started. I joined that group. I began to learn about it, realized that I really enjoyed it. And when the group owner pitched a high ticket mastermind, I knew that it was what I needed to go to the next level. And within just a couple months of joining that, I realized that I didn't actually want to promote the business that I had. I was ready to start something different, but I know that would have never happened had I not taken the risk and joined the mastermind and had the support around me to realize what I could do. So I have been in masterminds ever since
mm,
because the value of it for me, it's motivating for me, it's encouraging. So I'm in a couple different ones right now, and I'm also a coach in a couple different ones too, because we just, as entrepreneurs, especially in the digital world, we don't necessarily have an office. We're not surrounded with people all day. So we have to make our own networks. We have to build our own tribes. And if we don't have that, it's super isolating and it's super lonely.
mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And how was the shift that you mentioned that it wasn't that you needed to work on your business, but you needed to make a new business? How was
Mhm.
that? Wha-
Well, once I got out of having that one client kind of run the show, I realized that there were a lot of really unhealthy patterns that had developed over the years with them. they were very hard to work with, but I didn't know any different. When I started getting clients outside of that, I realized that that's not the way it had to be. I didn't have to sacrifice time outside of normal working hours if I didn't want to. There were people who were reasonable, who didn't call and scream at me over the phone. And I realized that if I had the choice, and I did, that I didn't want to keep putting myself in that position anymore if I didn't have to. And so that was kind of the first shift. Like, I have options. I don't have to subject myself to being mistreated for a paycheck anymore.
Hmm.
And once that door was open, I realized, well, okay, so if I have that option, I should build a business around things that I love to do. So I started asking myself, what is it that I can imagine myself doing for the next, until I retire? You know, what are the things that make me feel fulfilled as a person? What do I have skills in that are marketable? And so that's kind of how that shift came about, was realizing that I have a choice. I have options if I'm willing to put the work in to build something that's sustainable.
Hmm. That's amazing because I remember this ties so much for me to like people's like health and journey in health, because a lot of times people are feeling bad most of the days, and then they don't realize that they don't have to feel that way. It's almost like an abusive relationship with that
Mm-hmm.
disease. Like it's like a part of their identity, part of my identity too, of things that I dealt with. And it wasn't until like, man, I don't have to be that person. I can be somebody else over here. And I feel like business, and that's why I love like the marriage of businesses and health, because I feel like with business there is no BS. Like, you're either getting results or you're not, so you have to grow. you know you have to
Mm-hmm.
create something that creates value for other people. And that's it. Like, if you're not doing that, you're not getting results, and so you're forced to grow. Um and and s- and, and so that's amazing to watch what you're saying, that you had that transition from uh, an abusive kind of client that you had, and you're like, I don't need that. Like, I'm better than that. It's like self-worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely is. It's a matter of saying, okay, partly it was my fault because I allowed it. You know what I mean? They would continue to act the way they did because when they would call, I would jump. So, part of it was me, but part of it was just realizing that then it's my responsibility to step out of it.
That's
They're not going
amazing.
to change. I can't depend on someone else to change. I'm the one who needs to make a change.
That's so crazy. See, because that's exactly the same when people come to me, for instance, for a pill, and 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 I've done it too. Where we want this quick fix, but actually, what we need to do is like, hey, this is my fault. Like, I did this to myself, and I need to take ownership of it, responsibility of it, and be able to move forward, like almost as a new identity.
Right, right. As long as you stay in the position of a victim, you can't grow.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, that's so true. I see these like with people in disability, because they're getting paid to get sick, and so it's
Right.
like they have a relationship with that. But it's like their job to be sick, and so it's
Hmm.
really hard for them to get better. And so and then what was like the first breakthrough that you had, like when you were like, oh man, like this is working?
Yeah. So I totally burned out in the first 6 months. I did a lot of social media platform management, and it just was not a good fit for me. So like I said, I took a step back. I stopped bringing on my own clients for a time, and I started working in support role with agencies. And that gave me the freedom to only choose to do the things I enjoyed doing. So I only did two things for the next 12 months, and that's write copy and manage Facebook ads. And I got really good at both. I was already a good writer, but I got really good at understanding how to write copy that made conversions happen for Facebook ads, because Facebook ads are tricky. There's a lot of policy. There's a lot of things that Facebook has rules around. And when I boiled it down to just two things that I really wanted to focus on, it got fun again. And I realized that, I could see myself doing this. I couldn't see myself continuing to manage social platforms. It just wasn't aligned with my skill set or my desires of what I wanted to do. But I could see myself doing this. And the more I did it, the more opportunities I had to continue doing it. And eventually I got to the point where I realized I was going to have to choose between those two, because I only had so many hours in a day. So I probably spent 3 or 4 months like putting that decision off, knowing what direction I was going to go, but also, leaving behind a set income from an agency was a hard leap to make, because then it's all on you. It's all your responsibility to generate the leads and to get clients and things like that. And it all kind of came to a conclusion over Christmas. For the first time in maybe 10 years, I took 4 days off over Christmas for the first time, and it was amazing. But the day I went back to work after that, I was instantly slammed with client requests through the agency and my own projects, and instantly overwhelmed with the business I had built. It was how it was before I took this 4 days off. It wasn't any different than it was before, but I was different because I realized that it was my responsibility to build the kind of business that I wanted. And I'd let myself get too busy. I'd let myself get too wrapped up in someone else's business. And I love that business. I still write most of their copy. But it was time for me to step out and grow my own business. And I made the decision, like it was time. Like I knew, oh, sorry, my
That's
daughter,
okay.
my daughter called. So that was when I knew that it was time to make the next shift into just focusing on copy and building my own business around it.
That's such a cool story because it ties into how important it is for me. It just makes me think of how important it is to step back, and to take
Mm-hmm.
time for ourselves, and to relax, to do whatever it is. Like yesterday, I was feeling kind of been going a lot, and I just needed something, and we went to do the flotation tanks. I don't know if you
Oh,
ever been going.
the
Yeah,
sensory deprivation.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. And it was like the best sleep I've had, but it was so needed, and I felt so refreshed. And then when you come back, you just realize new things that, man, I was like doing that too much and hurting myself. Can let
Mm-hmm.
that go. Let that go. It just gets better and better.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. As long as you stay so busy and so maxed out, you don't have time to consider whether what you're building is a good fit or not.
you don't even have time to think that, like, is this what I want?
Right.
Just trying to make it work.
Yeah. Every 6 months, I try to reevaluate, because I've noticed that every 6 months, my business tends to go through a shift or a change. I've come to expect it and anticipate it now, instead of it being an obstacle to get through, which the first couple of times it happened, I was totally blindsided and totally like, what's going on? I thought this was going so well. Now I can see and anticipate it and meet it where it's at and push through. But it seems to happen like every 6 months. I have to take a step back and say, okay, here's what's happened in the last 6 months. What part of it is in line with my business that I want to design, and what part of it isn't, and how can I change that?
Yeah, it's like navigation or something, like you go out in the boat, and then the weather changes, things
Yeah,
changes. You gotta, like, okay, where do I still want to go to the same place? Maybe
right.
not.
Recalculating. Yeah,
Yeah,
recalculating.
recalculating, recalculating. And
Totally.
and when you started with the mastermind and everything, when was the first big win that you had? And how did that go down?
Oh, the first big win, what would I consider? Well, probably one of the smartest things I ever did for my business was to step out of it and really go all in on skill learning. So when I started writing and managing ads for an agency, that gave me 12 months of in the trenches doing it every day. It gave me a super high level understanding of how digital marketing works, which really serves me now in my business. So I consider that a huge win. But not long after that, I actually landed a contract with the same publishing company that writes like Russell Brunson's books, and now it's Sharfin's books, and lots of people in the digital marketing influencers as a ghostwriter. So that was a big one for me because I enjoy working with digital marketers and influencers. Then it opened up more in terms of network for me.
Hmm.
And I mean, really, they just took a chance on me. I'd never written a book before. They were like, okay, great. You look like a good fit. And it was a good fit. But I'll always be super grateful that they took a chance on somebody in the middle of the cornfield in Iowa, like, okay, this seems like a good idea. It could have been a really bad idea, but I don't know. But I like that. And just anytime I hear from a client and they say, oh my gosh, this totally blew me out of the water. It totally exceeded our expectations. Um, just this last week, I had a client who had a goal of getting 200 people signed up for a challenge, and they ended up with 500. And so I love that. Those are my big wins, like seeing them just their expectations get so exceeded because the people I work with help other people. I work with coaches, I work with course creators, I work with people who have memberships and services that help people improve their lives. And so that's a win for me. Anytime I can help my clients get better results for their own campaigns, I consider that big, big win for me because that's what I do.
Yeah, for sure. And it's almost what I've learned to realize is that as I'm hearing my own voice, and so so it takes me a little. It's kind of weird. I'm hearing my own voice, but as I've in the medical field, I was so entrenched in the medical field, boom, 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 for so many years, and then as I'm learning this digital space and the entrepreneurship in the past 6 7 years, it's been amazing to see the power of copy and the power of the written word, you know
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost like the key into our brains.
Mm-hmm.
It just holds the key, so like you have such an important skill. And uh, and and for I mean, and then so the drug companies know this for sure, the big marketing companies. And so it's almost like all these coaches, and for me too, it's so important to be able to learn these skills so that we can have the same amount of influence, so it's even, so
Mm-hmm.
that then it's balanced, so the truth, so then they can choose.
Right, right. Yeah, definitely. I like to say it's the difference between messaging and copy. Copy is that physical manifestation of what your message is. But if you don't know what your message is, if you don't know what the people that you serve need to hear in order to trust you and know you and like you, then you'll struggle with your copy because you don't have the foundation of your message behind it.
And so when I'm here, what I one time this guy told me that branding was kind of like this myth, because we can market, but then our clients are actually the one, or our communities that we build are actually the ones who create the brand. And so it's kind of similar to what you're telling me, that like it's people's needs and the wording they use and the language and their problems and how they describe their struggle that gets
Mhm.
put into this copy, huh?
Definitely. The most important element of copy and messaging is the target audience, because you can write something that's so amazing, but if you don't have the right person in mind, it won't work. The, the person, it's not You could throw a bunch of words together that sound awesome, but if you're not doing it with your target audience in mind, then you're just putting words together. So definitely, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're right. You're right. And what's next for you? What's next for Krista?
Well, I'm going through a beta of my first course, which teaches a messaging framework that I developed. I'm also headed to BossCon, which is a digital marketing conference this weekend in the Twin Cities, where I'll be doing some, um, what is it when you sit around the table?
Like a workshop?
Yeah, like a workshop. I'll be doing a panel and also, why can't I think of it? But like a workshop.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and
And
stuff like that. And that's always fun.
and this is boss con, like a boss, like a
BossCon.
boss,
Yeah,
like baby
yeah.
boss.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So,
And in your workshop, what would you like? What do you go through, for instance? What type of things? If I was in your workshop, what type of things kind of do you run through?
well, this one will be, it's a roundtable discussion. That's what it is. So people will be able to
Oh,
come and
okay.
ask me questions about what I do and ask me questions about, their offers and how they can create a message that describes their mission. So I'm really, really strong on creating messaging frameworks that provide that baseline for what you say to your audience. So I talk a lot about knowing your audience, knowing what they think, knowing how they feel, know what they've tried before, know what's worked and what hasn't, how you can begin to then communicate how your offer is the solution that they're looking for.
Got you. And yeah, because I guess, like you said, if you don't know that, that's like the key to you can't help them really.
Right,
They
right.
know that.
Yeah, right. And the reason why I developed a messaging framework was for that very reason. I would ask my clients questions, but I needed some way to get the information. Like I needed a system to be able to get the information I needed to write the best copy possible. And a messaging framework was what I needed. And until I developed that, I spent a lot of time going back and forth and asking follow-up questions and trying to understand. But once I put this into place, then I could run each of my clients through it and know that I would have the information I needed to write good copy. Because a lot of people think, well, I'll just hire a copywriter to do it for me. I'm not a good writer. I'll just hire a copywriter. But if your copywriter doesn't have the information that they need, then they can be a really good copywriter, but it still might not work because if you don't know what information they need, if you don't know what to give them as an entrepreneur, it just makes it really hard to turn back and give you copy that converts.
And so a messaging framework is almost like a process that you've created through inquiry and questions and things like that to get that information out of your clients.
Right. Yeah. So there's 8 foundational pillars to it. And so we walk through each of those 8 pillars. And when we're done, we know exactly who the audience is. We know exactly how the offer solves their problems. And we know exactly how to communicate that to the audience in a way that's super compelling. It attracts the right people to it. And it makes it super easy for them to go ahead and opt in and make the decision to buy in.
Gotcha, gotcha. And if a couple of the last questions that I have is, if we were to watch a movie about your life, what would be a point in the movie that would be like, oh my God?
Okay, so I, my husband and I got engaged after 6 weeks of dating. So that was kind of a big one. We didn't get married for 8 months after that, but it was almost a year, a little less than a year from the time that we met to the time that we got married, because we just knew right away. Um, Recently, someone gave us a goat, so that was fun because we didn't ever plan on owning a goat. So that's been a new education in of itself. But yeah, probably the big one would be losing 80% of my income while homeschooling my children and building a business all at the same time with a husband with two gimpy shoulders.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. You just push through that. And I was thinking about getting a goat, where we used to live in Hawaii, so we had so much more grass to cut, and we were like,
Yeah,
why
no
don't
kidding.
you just get a bunch of goats, or and they can cut the grass.
I know we
Uh,
need more goats than that. We've got 3 acres.
oh, do
Poor
you?
Frank, he's busy. Yeah, my husband's been trying to talk me into it forever. Like ever since we first got married, and I was like, no, I don't want a goat. So then we get given this goat, and now the goat's my favorite. And he's like, see,
How's the goat? Is it they're pretty chill or?
super chill. He's like a dog. He wants to
Huh?
follow you around, and if he gets off of his like, so he sleeps in the barn at night, and then we let him out, and we tie him up so that he can't go into the road or whatever. But if he gets untied, he just comes and sits on the front step like a dog. Or he might like look in the window. He'd be like, hey Frank, you're loose again, awesome, let's go tie you up again. It's crazy.
That's awesome. Um, and I think the last question I have is, what do you think? Because I struggle with this a lot with when patients and working with a lot of business people, and that a lot of times we're doing well, and then something happens like when you lost the 80%, and we realize like, man, like I'm not thriving. Or and what do you think thriving is?
I think i think it's not necessarily the idea that you're sitting on a cloud somewhere and there's no problems and the money's rolling in. I think it's more of a state of mind. Like, am I doing what I was called to do, even if there are difficulties and challenges that come up? Am I operating my business how I want to, in a way that's sustainable for me and my family? I mean, it could still be challenging. You still might work a lot of hours as you do when you're first starting out, but when you're on the right track and you're serving people the way that you were meant to serve and you're doing things that are fulfilling to you, I think that's thriving.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree anymore. That's awesome. If there is a mother out there somewhere with homeschooling kids and just lost 80% of their business, and their husbands have two, you know, painful shoulders, what would you say to them right now?
I would say find a community. Think about what you love to do, and then find a community that will give you not just the training and the skill set to turn it into a business, but the support and friendship and safe place to be able to grow that. And look for people who are a couple years ahead of you to learn from. They've been there, they've done that. This isn't news to them. Nothing you say can surprise them. They know exactly where you've been. And then lean on that community. Don't just
That's
throw in the towel. You can build a business that's in line with what you and your family, what works for you, and the things that you love to do.
that's awesome. Well, that wraps it up for me. Thank you so much, Chris. I think this was such an
Sure.
awesome interview.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you'll be so helpful for so many people, and people listening to it, if they're going through something similar. I love the last part that you said. That's awesome.
No
So thank you so
problem.
much. I appreciate it. And until next time, and I wish you all the best in all your endeavors.
Same to you.
Okay, take it easy.